Okay, so let's dive into something that sounds almost like science fiction, right?
Right.
But it's actually being seriously considered in research circles today. Imagine a future, maybe way off, maybe closer than we think, where quantum teleportation isn't just, theoretical physics for sending quantum states around, but it actually evolves to potentially move physical matter.
hmm And that's a future concept that forces us to confront some truly unprecedented challenges.
Exactly. Because, I mean, if physical matter teleportation actually becomes possible, well, it instantly creates this huge, potentially catastrophic security problem. How on earth do you protect, say, sensitive locations,
Yeah.
military bases, state capitals, key government buildings,
hmm
from someone who could just sort of appear inside?
Yeah, that's the precise and, yeah, maybe slightly terrifying challenge that our source material really gets into. We've done a deep dive into research, some papers exploring this very specific hypothetical. How would you even begin to secure places against a quantum teleportation threat?
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack all of that. We'll explore this idea of quantum exclusion zones, this theoretical defense concept. We'll look squarely at the immense technical hurdles that are in the way right now, and then we'll get into the proposed future solutions, the research directions that the sources are outlining. Think of it as a peek into how some really cutting-edge minds are already tackling tomorrow's seemingly impossible security problems. Let's unpack it.
Okay, so the fundamental issue, and the research really highlights this, it starts with quantum entanglement. That
Yeah.
really bizarre phenomenon where two particles get linked and their states are correlated instantly no matter how far apart they are.
Which is already pretty mind-bending when you're just talking about quantum information.
Yeah,
But if,
sure.
future tech could somehow use this principle, maybe mixed with other breakthroughs to, I don't know, assemble or replicate matter from point A to point B using entanglement, well, the security implications for actual physical locations are just profound.
They really are. The sources specifically mention places like military bases, state houses, even houses of parliament. These are prime examples of critical spots that would need a totally new kind of security against that sort of threat. I mean, think about it. Your traditional defenses, walls, guards, reinforced doors, they mean basically nothing if an adversary can just bypass physical space altogether.
Right. Completely bypasses it. So the research proposes this theoretical defense idea, the quantum exclusion zone.
Correct, a quantum exclusion zone, yeah. It's conceived as this protective measure specifically designed to prevent unauthorized quantum teleportation from happening inside a defined area. So it's not about catching them after they arrive, it's about actively messing up the process that lets them get there in the first place.
Okay, so the basic idea is to interfere with the quantum mechanics that are needed for the teleportation itself.
Precisely. The thinking is either you prevent the necessary quantum entanglement from even being established into the zone, or if somehow it is, you disrupt the super delicate quantum states that are needed for the teleportation process to finish before matter could, theoretically, materialize.
Huh. Fascinating. So, how might these theoretical zones actually work? What are the specific defense ideas being proposed?
Well, the source material lays out three main theoretical approaches that researchers are, exploring. The first one is called decoherence induction.
Okay.
This basically involves actively creating an environment inside the zone that forces any quantum states floating around to lose their coherence. Essentially, you make them collapse into stable, classical states, and that breaks the entanglement needed for teleportation.
So it's like generating a kind of controlled chaos that
hmm
makes all the quantum weirdness just fall apart.
Yeah, you could think of it like that. It might involve using very controlled electromagnetic fields, specifically designed to interfere with quantum coherence, or maybe introducing specific kinds of quantum noise patterns that stop stable entanglement from lasting inside that protected space.
Okay, so make the environment hostile to the quantum state itself. Got it. What's the second approach?
That one's quantum state disruption. This is a bit more direct. It involves generating interfering quantum fields, sometimes they call it quantum jamming, aimed squarely at breaking the specific quantum correlations needed for teleportation. It could also, theoretically, involve using targeted, very precisely controlled electromagnetic pulses, again, designed to disrupt those crucial quantum links.
So actively fighting the quantum signal needed for the jump, almost.
In principle, yes,
Yeah.
at that fundamental level. And then the third approach is environmental control. This one's all about tightly managing the physical conditions inside the zone. So manipulating temperature, having incredibly precise control over electromagnetic fields, maybe adjusting local magnetic fields. all to make it extremely difficult for those delicate quantum states to even form or, be maintained. The research also mentions possibly using physical barriers, maybe materials with specific quantum properties built right into the structure to inherently interfere with potential teleportation attempts.
Wow. So it's like a three-pronged attack on the quantum state.
Hmm.
Make it collapse, actively disrupt it, and make the whole environment totally inhospitable. It sounds incredibly complex, almost impossible.
And you've hit exactly on the core issue that the source material is very, very clear about. This leads straight into the really daunting technical hurdles that stand in the way of, well, ever actually implementing something like this. These challenges are just monumental.
What for you feels like the single biggest showstopper among them?
Oh, it's tough to pick just one, honestly. But the level of precision required it's almost unimaginable. Quantum states are just so sensitive. Any disruption risks collapsing all the states, right? The huge challenge is affecting only the unwanted, unauthorized quantum states linked to a teleportation attempt, without disrupting any legitimate quantum operations that might be happening inside the zone, which, ironically, could include your own quantum security systems or communication networks in the future.
Right, right. You don't want your defense system to basically launch a denial of service attack on itself.
Exactly. Then there's detection. Our current tech is it's nowhere near being able to reliably detect all quantum states, especially over any significant area. Plus, the very act of measuring in quantum mechanics actually changes the state you're trying to look at. That makes passive monitoring incredibly hard. Add to that the complexity of entangled particles existing in multiple states at one superposition, and just knowing what's going on quantum mechanically inside the zone is a massive, massive problem. The source also points out we just don't have the tech to even reliably detect that a teleportation attempt is happening.
So you can't really see the threat clearly. And trying to look might actually mess things up anyway. What about trying to cover a large area, like a whole base?
Yeah, scale is a huge hurdle. Quantum effects are typically things we observe and manipulate at the atomic or subatomic level. Maintaining controlled quantum conditions or disruptions consistently over something as big as a building, let alone an entire military base. That's an engineering challenge we can barely even conceive of today, and tied to that are the energy requirements.
Yes.
Generating the necessary fields or disruptions. The energy needed scales exponentially with the size of the protected area. The research suggests this factor alone might make truly large-scale zones just impractical.
Exponential energy increase. Yeah, that's not trivial.
It's a huge one. And finally, there are just the inherent current technological limitations. We simply don't have the ability right now to selectively identify or block specific types of quantum entanglement. We can't reliably tell the difference between, say, a good entangled pair meant for secure communication and a bad one intended for some malicious teleportation attempt.
Okay, so the initial idea of a simple exclusion zone, like a hard physical barrier based on physics, seems incredibly difficult. Maybe impossible with current thinking. But the research doesn't just stop there, right? It kind of pivots to a more refined, layered approach.
It does, yeah. Recognizing those limitations of trying to build one single all-powerful zone, the research proposes a layered defense model. It draws parallels with, modern cybersecurity strategies. You don't just rely on one firewall, right? You build multiple layers of defense in depth. Future quantum security, the source suggests, will probably need something similar.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's walk through these proposed layers. What's the first line of defense in this model?
Layer 1, early warning and detection. This is all about sensing potential quantum threats as early as possible. Ideally, before teleportation could even be attempted. It relies on networks of quantum state monitoring sensors. These would be designed to look for unusual quantum states, unexpected entanglement patterns, or maybe specific signatures that might show up before a teleportation event, like someone preparing entangled pairs for a jump.
So basically setting up quantum sensors like tripwires or alarms around the perimeter.
Kind of, yeah. It also includes continuous environmental surveillance. So, monitoring for subtle changes in the background conditions, things like electromagnetic fields, temperature shifts, even background quantum noise. Anything that could indicate someone is trying to manipulate the local quantum environment to get ready for an attempt.
All right, so layer 1 is about spotting suspicious quantum activity early. What happens if something gets past that?
Then you hit layer 2, active perimeter defense. This layer is more about actively disrupting incoming threats right at the boundary. It includes those concepts we talked about earlier, like quantum field disruption generating controlled interference, that sort of quantum jamming idea, but specifically targeting any unauthorized entanglement trying to cross the perimeter. The theoretical goal is for it to be sophisticated enough to let authorized quantum operations pass through unharmed.
Wow, that requires incredible discrimination, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. That's a huge part of the challenge. This layer would also use decoherence inducement systems along the perimeter, basically trying to force any unauthorized incoming quantum states to collapse the moment they try to enter the protected area.
Okay, so layer 2 is actively fighting at the border. Does the physical structure itself still play a role in this layered defense?
Definitely. Which brings us to layer 3, physical security measures. This layer integrates the defense right into the fabric of the protected place. It includes using material barriers, so structures built or maybe coated with specially designed materials that naturally interfere with quantum states, making the building itself inherently more resistant to teleportation or the stable formation of quantum links inside its walls.
So the building materials themselves act as a kind of quantum shield.
That's the theoretical goal, yeah. This layer also emphasizes precise environmental controls within the structure. So maintaining specific temperature ranges or tightly controlled electromagnetic fields inside, just to make it inherently difficult for those delicate quantum states to stick around. It reinforces those decoherence principles.
Building the defense into the walls. That makes a lot of sense. What's
Okay.
the innermost layer?
That's layer 4, core protection. This is really the last line of defense for the most critical assets inside the protected area. It relies heavily on quantum authentication. So any legitimate quantum operations or data transfers happening within this innermost core would need really strict authentication using advanced quantum cryptographic protocols.
Ah, so even if a threat somehow managed to get through all the other layers, they couldn't actually do anything sensitive or access critical systems without the right quantum level key, basically.
Precisely. It essentially becomes an access control problem, but at the quantum level. And this layer also includes emergency state collapse triggers. These would be systems that could, if an undeniable, unauthorized teleportation attempt is detected right inside the core, instantly trigger a collapse of all quantum states in that specific area as a kind of failsafe. Like pulling the plug on a network during a major cyber attack.
Wow. Okay, that layered model feels much more, I don't know, robust and maybe more realistic than just hoping for a simple, impenetrable dome. But managing all those interlocking systems, that sounds incredibly complex itself.
Oh, it absolutely is. And the research points out the critical need for very sophisticated integration and control. You'd need a centralized command and control system, almost certainly leveraging AI integration for the real-time analysis of just tons of quantum sensor data, and for threat identification and making those split-second decisions on how to activate the different defensive layers.
AI managing the quantum defense grid. Yeah, that's quite an image.
It really highlights the complexity and the sheer speed of response that would be needed. The system would also need to be an adaptive defense. It would have to be capable of learning from threats it detects, maybe failed attempts, and continuously evolving its strategies, much like how advanced cybersecurity systems work today.
Okay, beyond the purely technical challenges, what are the sort of practical considerations for even thinking about implementing something like this down the road?
Well, the source definitely reiterates the significant energy requirements needed for each layer, especially the active ones like disruption fields. Optimizing that energy use would be absolutely critical. There's also that constant, immense challenge of allowing legitimate operations to happen without being blocked while still stopping threats. Distinguishing between authorized and unauthorized quantum activity, that needs just an unprecedented level of precision and discrimination.
Right, you don't want to accidentally shut down your own essential systems while trying to block an attack.
Exactly. And finally, there's the question of scale and coverage. Security needs are going to vary wildly, right? From maybe a single secure room to an entire military base. So the system would likely need to be modular, allowing defenses to be scaled appropriately for whatever specific area needs protecting.
Thinking about the broader implications here, if this future ever happens, it really forces a fundamental rethink of critical infrastructure security, doesn't it?
Completely. You'd need new building materials, continuous quantum monitoring systems everywhere, a really deep integration of this quantum level security with traditional physical security and cybersecurity measures. It also really underscores the need for, international discussion, developing frameworks, standards, maybe response protocols for quantum threats, much like the world is grappling with emerging cyber threats right now.
Okay, this is all looking pretty far into the future, based on a hypothetical advancement. Where does the source material kind of ground this discussion back in the reality of quantum teleportation today?
Yeah, and that's the crucial current reality check the source provides. It's a really important context. It emphasizes that today, quantum teleportation only transmits the quantum state or information of a particle, things like its spin or polarization. It doesn't transmit the particle itself, and certainly not physical matter. It also requires both a quantum channel for the entanglement part and a classical channel, like a laser or radio wave, to send measurement data. It's incredibly sensitive to any environmental interference. It only happens at the subatomic level, involving maybe a few particles at most. And it's just very, very far away from anything resembling beaming physical objects around, like in Star Trek.
Okay. So the security concepts we've been talking about are really theoretical defenses against the theoretical future capability, built on real but currently very limited quantum principles.
Precisely. It's speculation based on extrapolating current science. It's not some imminent threat we're facing tomorrow morning. However, the research is valuable because, as the source concludes, thinking about these really daunting challenges is exactly what drives innovation in quantum security research today.
Ah, so the very effort to imagine how we might defend against future quantum threats is actually pushing the boundaries of quantum technology and security right now.
That's a key takeaway, yeah. The security measures, even the theoretical ones, have to evolve hand in hand with the technology itself. Effective security in this hypothetical future probably won't be about just, blocking physics with a brute force field. It's much more likely to involve sophisticated systems to detect, authenticate, and ultimately control quantum teleportation activities.
So it feels like the same quantum principles that could potentially create the vulnerability are also the very tools needed to build the defense.
That's a core idea running through the research, absolutely.
Well, this deep dive has definitely stretched the imagination from that sci-fi possibility of matter teleportation all the way through these complex layered defenses and then grounding it back in the current reality of quantum science.
It's a really fascinating intersection, isn't it? Theoretical physics, huge engineering challenges, and future security strategy all rolled into one.
Yeah. So thinking about those immense energy requirements we discussed for some defenses and how that layered approach seems to shift towards authentication and control rather than just trying to build like impenetrable physics barriers. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Does the ultimate security of future physical matter teleportation become less about building, physical walls using quantum principles and maybe more about identity verification and access management, but at the quantum level? Perhaps surprisingly similar, at least in philosophy, to how we secure digital networks today. Definitely something to think about.